Hello and welcome to the Parents Advocate podcast, from surviving to thriving in your household. My name is Sonia Schwalen. Next to me, as always, my beautiful bride, Dr. Sonia Schwalen, pediatric psychologist expert and nationally certified school psychologist. We have a very exciting show today where we're going to talk about fear and how fear can lead to anxiety, the dark side, the things that you just want to avoid, especially when we're raising kids. Fear can start out at a very, very young age, and it can ultimately cripple them all the way through school and even into their adult years, and that can lead to extreme anxiety and other mental health issues. So, fear. What do you think of, Dr. Schwalen, when you hear fear?
I think about how fear and anxiety in my world are actually synonyms. So, it's just a different way of saying the same thing.
Yeah, so, one thing that we can talk about when it goes along with fear is that sometimes fear can be good. Fear actually is good. In fact, we were born with an instinct or instincts to where we fear things, but it's really about not letting fear get the best of us. Because when we fear things, then it allows us to be more alert, to really be more cautious of what's going on, our surroundings, things like that. There's butterflies in your stomach. I know that when I played sports and did different things and was competitive in different arenas, that fear actually was really good for me to have, but I would never let it overcome me. So we're going to talk about fear and how it starts out with kids, and how parents a lot of times can actually just ultimately, without really knowing, encourage more and more fear, and then anxiety, and then again the very bad effects it can have. So there was one example that I saw or that I heard was actually it was a football player, a very successful football player in the NFL, and he had two younger boys, and he talked about how they were just scaredy cats about everything. In fact, one day they were outside and they started yelling for their dad. Hey, Dad, come here, hurry, come here. There's a bug out here. They wanted Dad to run outside and kill this little bitty bug because they were so scared. But it was like they were really, truly scared of this bug. He's like, come on, guys, are you kidding me? This is a little bug, It's that fear that can keep kids from doing different things and experiencing different things as well.
Okay, so what you said a second ago is that fear can lead to anxiety. And I said, well, I think of them as synonymous, right? And I think that's because I'm coming from that place of being a psychologist and kind of seeing anxiety disorders all the time, because anxiety disorders are really common. But then what you said after that about, well, fear can actually be very informative and serve a purpose made me realize that fear and anxiety are not the same thing. So thank you for that, because anxiety is the name of an actual disorder when fear becomes to the point that it rises to something clinical, right?
Well, I want to just really quick. I just want to pause real quickly. Did you get that on recording very loud and clear that I taught Dr. Schwalen something just now? Man, all right, I quit. I'm going home. I'm good. Victory.
You helped me take a few steps back, which is extremely appropriate for this show. So thank you for that. But what you made me think of too is an example that I give to my clients all the time. And I really want to say it right now because it's going to help a lot of people understand this. So yes, fear and any emotion is actually a source of information. Okay. And a lot of times emotions and psychological mumbo jumbo or jibber jabber or whatever is stigmatized to the point where people go through life even being taught that they need to just stuff it and be a man or be tough or whatever. And essentially they're taught to ignore that information that our emotions can give us. And when you think about how people have evolved, right? If you think about like back in caveman days, without fear, cavemen would not have survived, okay? So they would hunt and gather at any given time. They're always like searching for a threat because they could turn a corner and come face to face with the bear. And if they didn't have fear, right? If they didn't have that information, the adrenaline, the fight or flight response, they would not be able to survive. And so very much like the examples you gave, like it definitely serves a purpose still to this day. All of our emotions do. All of them do. When things feel good and bring us joy or make us happy, that's a sign that, hey, what we're doing is maybe something we should continue doing, or I know I'm safe, I'm comfortable in this situation. If I feel a little nervous or scared, I need to pay attention to that. That's my gut feeling telling me that maybe this isn't a good situation for me to be in. Okay, so emotions serve a purpose. They can give us information. And what happens when something rises to a clinical level of anxiety is because, unfortunately, because of the world we live in, people are kind of just naturally wired to always be looking for the threat, even though we're not in caveman days anymore. And so negative thinking can become a very normal part of how our brain works. Throughout the day, if you ever pay attention to what you're thinking, so think about your thoughts, if you're ever doing that, you may realize that in any given hour of the day, you have multiple negative thoughts enter into your brain. And so being naturally wired to look for the threat, even though in today's society, I mean, come on, let's be real, there aren't that many, right? Especially in Western American society, people are busy spending time indoors, behind a screen. They're not really in danger. Yet their mind functions, the level of anxiety or fear that they're experiencing takes them to the place of being in fight or flight mode all the time. And that's when it becomes an anxiety disorder, when their response to what's going on doesn't necessarily match what's actually happening in their life. So seeing the small bug and being terrified of it to the point where it's like a trauma means that those children probably have a developed anxiety issue, right? A phobia even of bugs, because they're having this intense fight or flight response that dad doesn't understand at all. Yet for these kids, it's so terrifying that they can't even move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think some of that comes down to really how do we approach our kids in those moments too, because we got to be very careful, because we can sit there and poke fun and whatnot. I remember growing up, my dad was always been a big prankster, and so anything that scared us or whatnot, he would want to do over and over and over again. So whether it was bugs or snakes or animals or turtles, even whatever it may be, he was always trying to get that thrill, that laugh out of seeing us just scared us to death, as much as possible. And so it was really funny for him. And, of course, when it wasn't, I had 3 siblings. So when it wasn't me and it was them, I mean, I thought it was funny to me as well. But when it was me, it wasn't so funny. But it just reminds me, just even with our oldest son, these last couple of days doing some yard work in the backyard and the jungle that we have back there. And, there's been several snakes. And, it comes down to ultimately most of the snakes that we would ever come across ever in life, especially in Texas, especially in our backyard, most of them aren't going to be poisonous. They're not going to be harmful to us. But yet we don't have that education to understand or discern between, is this a dangerous snake or is it not a dangerous snake? I have no clue. So I'm going to flight, unless I have my hoe in my hand, and then I'm going to, fight. But I'd rather just flight and just be done with it. Right. So, and the bugs is kind of the same situation. So those are actually moments where us as parents can really educate our kids, what kind of bug is this? Why should we not be scared? Why should we not be scared? Let's demonstrate that. And let's teach our kids how to kind of overcome our fears and face our fears, because that's going to also be very rewarding in development as they grow and get older.
Well, and so everything that you just said revolves around validation and respect for your child, right? Versus, I don't know, the example you provided, which is if it's scary, just put them through it over and over again because it's funny. That's not very respectful. That's not very validating or loving, right? I'm sorry you went through that.
Well, it makes people want to avoid things too. So then you have avoidance more than anything.
Avoidance is one of the biggest symptoms of anxiety and fear, right? Because it's very natural that when you're afraid of something, you're not going to go towards it. People do, in all situations, naturally go into self-preservation mode. I mean, survival, right? That's like the core instinct of our being. And so to avoid something that you think is scary or could hurt you is a very normal human response. And then the more and more you avoid something and you don't have exposures to it that are comfortable, safe, loving, respectful from your parents even, the bigger and scarier it gets in your mind. And so avoiding exposure to it altogether actually makes the anxiety in your mind about it worse. Yeah,
it's that little bitty fly that's flying around, it being some big, huge, ancient time dinosaur type of pterodactyl or something's going to come eat your head off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Well, so one thing I wanted to talk about, so when I looked at, fear and trying to do some research on fear and how do we really approach fear with our kids and whatnot, I came across a verse that I really like a lot, and it's a verse I've always really, really loved. It's Psalm 91, verse 5 through 6. It says, "Do not be afraid of the terrors of the night, nor the arrow that flies in the day. Do not dread the disease that stalks in darkness, nor the disaster that strikes at midday." And so that, one thing that I can always remember from being a very young kid and some of the things that I've gone through in my life and being on my own and some of the hard times I had to struggle through as well, I've never, ever feared really too much at all. Like, I've never feared death. I've never feared, the boogeyman or what's going to be around this corner. I mean, I've been in some scary places, and I've never had fear. And so when I dug further, I'm like, how is that possible? So it made me think about me and whatnot. Even with COVID and all that we've been going through as a really across the world, but here in the country as well, I just don't have the fear of me getting COVID. I mean, if I get COVID, I get COVID. It's going to be right. I mean, some of these things are planned out and ordained, I believe, based on my own faith. But I also believe that if I do come in contact with COVID, then I'm going to be able to overcome that. I just believe that. I don't fear the negative result of anything because I don't have that fear. And when I really did more research on that and really got more into scripture, it's because I know that I am loved. And I am loved by our Father, and I know that I can believe in Him and the security that He gives me, and I don't have to worry about anything. It's that confidence, that security that I get from the love that I know that He has for me. And so when I look at that and I'm looking at what kids really need is that to really overcome fear or to face fears, they just need to really be loved and feel that love and security, knowing that someone's going to be there to support them through it. So even though it may be overcoming a fear, or maybe it's trying to, hey, get up and try again. You fell down, you got hurt. Don't fear that bicycle that you just fell off of. I'm here to support you. I've got your back, and doing it with lots of love, that gives the kids the security they really need to continue to fight.
Yeah. So love and non-judgment, going at your child's own pace is also really important. It's reminding me of even just this morning when our 3-year-old had his swim lesson in the backyard today.
With the snakes.
He didn't care about the snakes. Those were cool. He was getting really tired with our swim instructor. He had swum for about 20 minutes straight, and he's only 3. And he was literally using both arms, kicking both legs today, and he was doing a really great job of just advancing, but without any breaks. And so in his 3-year-old way, he became extremely upset. This is not fearful, but it's still just like paying attention to where your kid's at and understanding that this is not just a behavior that he's trying to get out of it. He's kind of cold, right? It's early in the morning. He's been in the pool. He's tired now, and he doesn't see an end in sight because a 30-minute swim lesson for a 3-year-old is a really long time. And so instead of being forceful or judging him or saying to him that he was being a bad kid or anything like that because he was crying and really wanted to get out of the water, he was allowed to take a break and come sit in my lap and get the towel wrapped around him and spoken to in a way that was encouraging. And when he was ready, he was able to get back in and finish out the lesson. It was important for me as his mom to show him, you can't just cry and get out of something, but we can take a break, right? And do still what the expectation is. And then right away, as soon as the lesson was over, he got into a hot bath, he was warmed up, and he was back to normal. It was really that he was tired and cold. It was really bothering him. So when kids are really scared, it's kind of the same approach. You kind of have to really read where they're at and then give them a break sometimes also, right? And then with love and in a way that they see that they can count on you, they can trust you. You're not going to do anything that's going to hurt them. In fact, everything you do is actually to prevent them from getting hurt, right? Even if it means long term, because you might let them fall, but in the long term, it's going to make them a better bike rider or whatever. They need to feel that from you.
Yeah, and I want to jump into that really quick. That they know where anything hurt them or do anything that's going to hurt them. I think that's one thing we should really talk about a little bit right now, because I've seen so many times, even as a coach in baseball and basketball and football, some of the kids I was coaching, I would see different parents like be way over the top protecting their kids to keep them from getting hurt, not really letting them explore an adventure, which is really important in development, and whatnot, to where they would just shadow them and shelter them so much so they couldn't do anything. I mean, I don't see how they could possibly succeed in really anything unless it was at home behind a closed door with a blanket and a book and whatnot. That's all. I mean, seriously, because there's
a whole generation of kids that had that type of parent. It's, you know, that helicopter parent.
Yeah.
That's the mom who even storms into the advisor's office when they have a college age student and wants to go to bat for their 20-year-old, right? So those helicopter parents is what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not equipping the child to in a developmentally appropriate way, be able to become more and more independent.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of, you know, when I think about it, so we can overprotect our kids, which is going to cripple them forever. Okay. Or we can lead them to be more adventurous. So one thing that I really feel like I've been really strong at as a parent, and there's a lot of things that I didn't do very well. Some things I'm still working on. But one thing I know I do very well is I show all of our kids really how to be adventurous, how to, you know, go out there and have fun and not be scared of certain things. Like when we go to the park, you know, I will be out there on the ropes with them. I'll show them how to climb, how to step. I'll be up there every single, you know, step of the way. And as you mentioned, let them go at their own pace. So there's some times to where, you know, they want to stop first time doing something, some obstacle, and they'll get partway through it and they want to stop. And it could be very scary, and it could be climbing these ropes that could be very dangerous as well, especially when they're 2 and 3 years old. While I'll encourage them a little bit, but then all of a sudden when I really know for a fact, okay, they really can't go anymore right now, they just don't have it in them right now, then I encourage them, it's okay, we can stop, we can come back and do it again later on. And then over the last few months, as we've seen, I mean, we've got our 3-year-old, he's doing things that most 6, 7, 8-year-olds don't do in a lot of ways. But it's also being out there and doing it with them and also showing them, because we teach all the time about what thing, you know, kids are catching things more than they're being taught things or told things. And I think that's really important in every aspect, especially when it comes to fears and overcoming fears, being adventurous, trying new things and whatnot. We've got to be that parent that really encourages them in that way. So when it comes to bugs, like, you know, Mom, I know you're scared to death of spiders and you won't touch one, and there's all types of bugs you don't want to be around.
Let's just talk about why I'm scared to death of spiders, though, because it's extremely logical. Then when you smash a spider, there's like a 50% risk or more. I don't really know the numbers behind this, but I can do the research and come back to you next time.
It's not. That
if you smash it, its little babies will crawl out everywhere.
So let me just tell you, so over the last, 6 years we've been married now, you've had me kill probably, I can't tell you how many spiders. And I think maybe one time there's been babies that ran out. Maybe once.
It happens.
Maybe once. I mean, but there's been a ton of spiders, though.
Doesn't matter.
So, but anyway.
It's disgusting. Okay, so what I want to bring up is like a real life example, not about little kids, but about teenagers, because...
Well, I want to jump into something really quick. So about spiders, I have to say this.
Okay.
So I talked about earlier my relationship with the Lord and how His love has given me strength and no fear. It just dawned on me that every morning when you've been going on walks, He's been like having you walk through like spider webs and having spiders on you. So I think He's showing you that you don't have to be scared because He loves you and He's going to be there for you.
He makes me walk into spider webs because I take my mind off Him for a second.
I know.
He's trying to get my attention.
It's an internal battle you guys have. I understand. But anyway, so back to school. Also, there's going to be some fears because all these new things out. CDC just said all kids must wear masks 2 years old.
Well, I have real specific examples that I really want to give right now because I think this is actually something that a lot of kids are dealing with. So, in particular with high school kids, it's that week or that, it's around that time where kids are going to go walk the halls and get their schedule. And they start thinking about things, in terms of what if I don't get good grades? This year I'm taking more pre-AP classes or, last year I did fine, but what if this year is harder because not only am I taking pre-AP, but I'm also in sports or band or whatever. And I'm tired already because my coaches have me practicing this summer and now I get my schedule and I'm super overwhelmed. So that's a real common fear. And then another, what goes into that is like the fear of letting parents down, the fear of having to say, I can't hang, I need to just take general classes, or the fear of even going and talking to a teacher and asking for help. These things can become crippling for a lot of high school students. I mean, I hear about this stuff daily in the work that I do. Then I also hear about the fear of, I'm a freshman, and what if nobody likes me, or I have to go find someone to sit next to in the cafeteria, or what if I have to eat lunch all by myself because I'm too afraid to talk to people, I have social anxiety, I'm worried that they're going to judge me, or I even have an eating disorder and I'm too nervous to eat in front of other people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can look at, the younger kids, like our 8-year-old sometimes, she feels like sometimes she's getting bullied at school, right? And so she wakes up and she doesn't feel good. Her tummy hurts, or she doesn't want to go to school. She's got a stomach ache and whatnot. And, I know in the beginning I was like, yeah, she's just trying to stay home from school and ditch school. But, one thing that we have noticed is that she really just a lot of times doesn't like a lot of the kids, and she feels like she's getting bullied. And so she probably does have stomach aches and whatnot, because that's where that anxiety is, where she's feeling it at, right? So we should be in tune to that as parents as well.
Right. And so some of the actual action items in these situations, because a lot of times, even though they mean well, parents will talk their kids to death. Okay. And even at 16, 17 years old, when a child is in their fear and they're sharing that with you, so at 8 years old, at 14 years old, and again at 16, 17 years old, so this is elementary school, middle school, high school, it doesn't matter how old they are. If they're fearful and it, you talking them into logic is not going to help them. Okay. Our tendency as parents is to, you just got to go talk to your teacher. Just introduce yourselves to them. They like it when you come and talk to them. Or if you need help, we'll help you. Don't worry so much. Or, go tell your teacher that you're being bullied. Have you spoken to anyone about it? It's always like, yeah, you have this problem and you feel really, like it's a bummer. You feel really bad about it. But here, do X, Y, and Z, and it'll be fine. Okay, and that's a big mistake that parents make.
So it makes me feel like if I was the kid, like we were doing role playing here, I would be okay. That sounds great, Mom. Outwardly and inwardly, I'm like, yeah. And if I could really do that, then I would have done it already. Hello, idiot.
Most teenagers think that, right? Like, okay, if it was this easy, I wouldn't be so stuck. And so really what it means to meet your child where they're at is to be okay with the emotion first. Okay. And that's when I said earlier, a lot of adults have been taught their whole life to ignore emotions, to suck it up, to rub some dirt on it,
stuff it,
avoid. Okay. And now what I'm saying is, well, actually, if you're a parent, even if you're not good at this with yourself and your own emotions, or with your spouse even, you have to start meeting your child where they're at in their emotion. This is key to making anyone feel understood and heard. Okay. So if your child comes to you and says, I'm really worried. I think you think I'm going to get all good grades because I did last year, but that doesn't mean I'm going to this year. What are they doing? They're managing your expectations. That's a very normal thing for a teenager to say to parents. I might not do that well this year. They're already putting pressure on themselves. They're already thinking what you might be thinking and expecting, and they've worked themselves up about it. And then your response is, well, just go talk to your teachers. You're not really meeting them. So what I want to teach a little bit is about just like the amygdala, which is our emotion center of the brain, and then our executive function of the brain, which is like the prefrontal cortex area and some other parts of our brain. When we're in our emotion mind, which is the amygdala and even like the brainstem parts of it, that's like a very primal part of our brain. When we're in that part of our brain, we're even physically far away from the part of our brain that is in charge of logic and common sense and planning and organization. So structurally, we're far away from that part of our brain. And then the way we present when we're emotional is nowhere near logic.
I just got a light bulb.
What is it?
That's why women don't want men to fix everything for them, because they're in the emotional part of their brain and we're trying to be logical and fix it. And they're like, no, that's not what I want, you know?
So maybe now it's time for me to leave because I've accomplished something wonderful today. This is where the show can
It doesn't
end.
mean I can change the bad habits. I recognize it now.
You can change them. You're not that old.
Thank you. Well, my brain's not fully developed yet either, so I guess I can
It
change
is
it.
fully developed. I'm sorry.
It's not what you keep telling me.
So when someone's in their emotion and you try to respond with all this logic and here are the steps you need to take, what usually ends up happening is you get even more overwhelmed and more shut down response. So at that point, you might notice they're starting to cry now, or they're blowing you off and they just want to get out of the conversation, or they just stare at you blankly and they don't feel like you understand, and you keep talking because you think that's going to help, but it's actually just making you feel better. I mean, these are the cycles that parents are getting in with their child, no matter how old they are. When a child comes to you and they're sharing with you some concern or worry, or even able to put into words, I am worried or I am scared, even if they don't say that, they just say, hey, you know, I may not be able to get the same grades I got last year because of everything else going on this year. That's your hint to say, hey, tell me more about that. Like, what's going on with you right now? Or where's this coming from? Open-ended curiosity types of questions. The more curious you are, the more they're going to share, the more space they feel like they have to just be emotional. And then you might say, well, come here. You're going to be fine. I got you. And you just hug your kid. You don't talk them out of it. You just hug them out of it. Okay.
Hug it out.
Yeah, exactly. And then when your child is calm, and even in that moment, you're hugging them. Hey, what do you need from me right now? Do you want to go to your room and relax? Maybe this is a time for you to take a bath or get under the blankets, or are you okay? You sure you want to go to practice later? We can call the coach and ask if you can be a little late because you're just having a little bit of a hard time right now. Nothing but empathy and understanding. You flood them with it. And then once they're over it, like the next day or even like 10 minutes later, then you can go and have a problem-solving conversation.
Well, and one thing that's also important to note for parents, because I've seen this happen even with our own kids, but a lot of other kids I've coached, is when you have that empathy, you're going there with curiosity, you're just giving them space to let their emotions just bleed out. More times than not, once that's all said and done, as you mentioned, they also realize that their fear or anxiety or whatever it may be was really just, there's no basis behind it really anyway, or they help themselves through it. They figure it out on their own. It makes them feel better. They can face the giant now, and it's going to be okay.
Exactly. And so even that dad you brought up with kids who are afraid of a bug, in that moment when they're in their fear, that is not the time to say, well, come here, let me show you how insignificant this really is. You know, what's bothering you about this, or whatever they may be doing. Because all you're doing is talking to somebody who's completely, in those moments, incoherent. They're in their fear. We're not in the part of our brain that allows us to even think logically when we're having those emotions. And so the only response really that can help is, come here, I got you.
Take a step back, embrace your kid.
Yeah. And then when they're logical, you take them outside and say, let me just show you that this is really no big deal.
Sounds awesome, Dr. Schwalen.
Thank you. I try.
All right. So fear, anxiety, whatever your kids are going through, ultimately what kids really need is
Love and respect.
Love and respect. They need love, encouragement, and know that you are there for them, that you are their security blanket. It's that security blanket that allows us to propel forward, even as adults. When we know that we have a security blanket or a security net underneath us, we're not scared to climb new mountains, take new heights, do new things, accomplish more tasks. We can do it all. You know, just like when it comes to men and women, us husbands, we can go out there, we can accomplish anything. We can conquer the world if we have a great woman behind us, right? Because there's a saying, behind every great man, there's an even a better woman behind them. So it goes with our kids too, without saying. So, all right. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us for the Parents of Advocate podcast, from surviving to thriving in your household. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Have no fear.